Oh, indeed, it's about the time to start Flash News, the newest information from all around the world, but with Polish perspective. I'm Karolina Pańczkowska, and time to start. We start local. The Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki received negative COVID-19 result, but though he will remain in quarantine. In the meantime, the situation in the country is not getting better. Only during the last 24 hours, 5,000 new infections were reported, and Poland is still a nationwide yellow zone with masks obligation outdoor.
The unbreakable rules of fighting the coronavirus should be known to everyone. They are reminded by the Prime Minister, who went into quarantine in connection with an infection of a State Protection Service officer. The head of government assures that he feels good. I am in constant contact with my colleagues. The government works normally. The Prime Minister also held a meeting with the opposition on the pandemic situation in Poland in the formula of a video conference. We want to explain to our partners the real situation that is related to the pandemic. We believe that in such cases it is necessary to at least try to overcome the political divisions. Throughout Poland, we have more than 5,000 new coronavirus infections. 63 people have died. More than 5,600 patients fight with COVID-19 in hospitals, so almost all counties decided to increase the number of beds for people infected with the virus, just like in Silesia. We managed to create 330 additional places. Additional beds will be made in hospitals in Częstochowa, Bielsko-Biała, Bystra and Orzesze. The Ministry of Health calls for wearing masks, keeping a social distance and frequent hand washing. It also warns that if the current restrictions do not bring about any results, there will be more.
And we continue the information from Poland. The disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court waived the immunity of Judge Beata Morawiec. This is a result of a motion of the prosecutor's office. The charges concern misappropriation of public funds and acting in order to achieve financial gain.
Judge Beata Morawiec loses her immunity, and this is the first step to allow the prosecutor's office to present charges against her. However, this will only happen when the decision of the disciplinary chamber becomes final in the second instance. Does not predestine guilt, does not predestine one reasonable suspicion of crime. The hearing was held without the participation of Judge Beata Morawiec. She could have defended herself, she could have shown up, and she could have also explained. Judge Beata Morawiec rejected the charges. However, the witnesses incriminate her. Marek B., who heard a favorable verdict on appeal, testified that he gave the judge a cell phone for it. Other witnesses say that the judge was to arrange a contract between her brother's company and the court for the sale of goods, and Beata Morawiec herself was to receive 5,000 zlotys on the basis of a contract that should not be made. The contract with Beata Morawiec was a fictional one. The work was never realized and I never received it, and the only purpose was to pay Beata Morawiec money to reward her. Beata Morawiec may file a complaint against the decision of the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court to waive her immunity. However, if this decision is upheld, she may face up to 10 years in prison.
The visit of Polish President in Ukraine continues. Today, Andrzej Duda and President Volodymyr Zelensky opened an economic forum in Odessa. Ukraine leader encouraged Polish companies to invest in his country.
The third day of President Andrzej Duda's visit to Ukraine was entirely devoted to economy. I have no doubts that the potential for development of our cooperation is much greater than it has been so far, given the size of our internal markets. In the presence of both presidents, an agreement of cooperation between the ports of Gdańsk and Odessa was signed. Our initiative fits perfectly with the initiative of the 3 Cs, but it is also an alternative to importing goods from China with the omission of Russia. The cooperation of both ports is one of the elements of the strategy for the development of transport infrastructure between Poland and Ukraine: roads, border crossing, railroad lines and ports. Investments that create jobs and strengthen the economies of both countries. Poland plays a leading role in discussions on infrastructure projects such as Via Carpathia. We can and we want to be close partners in the realization of these regional projects. President Andrzej Duda's visit and meetings with entrepreneurs are to give a new impulse for investment and economic cooperation, and Poland indeed wants to be an advocate for Eastern countries on the European Forum. The Polish-Ukrainian border cannot be a barrier and an obstacle. The border should connect us. We do everything on our part to make it so. Ukraine is once again boldly opening up to investments and changing its regulations, and the current Ukrainian authorities, who want to model themselves on Poland and reform the economy, are also encouraging to do so. Putting order into legal forms and organizational forms is a foundation for future economic development, and economic development in itself is unlimited. President Andrzej Duda concluded his visit to Odessa by laying a wreath in front of the plaque commemorating President Lech Kaczyński, who placed great emphasis on the close cooperation between the countries of Central and Eastern Europe.
Following the presidential trip, our cameras covered the exclusive interview with both leaders who answered the questions of Polish and Ukrainian journalists. Let's listen to a brief of Gość Wiadomości program on tvp.info.
Two big countries, one almost 40 million inhabitants, the second one over 40 million inhabitants, each of them with access to sea on two sides of Europe. Close economic cooperation seems to be natural, as well as it seems to be natural to establish infrastructural connections between the ports on the Polish Baltic Sea coast and on the Black Sea coast in Ukraine. We also talked about our border crossings, about starting border crossings with joint clearance. Not everything at once, of course, everything step by step. The same applies to other areas. Today, because of the coronavirus, there is a downward trend in trade between our countries, but last year it amounted to 8 billion. It is a powerful market, both Ukrainian for Polish business and Polish for the Ukrainian business as well.
It is time to check the epidemic situation worldwide. Coronavirus report starts now. We kick off with the United Kingdom. Tragic numbers: 100,000 new coronavirus cases per week. Government had to reopen field hospitals. Further actions are also not excluded.
As announced by the British Prime Minister, the first level, the medium one, mean restrictions currently enforced in most of the country. High level means that people from different households are banned from meeting indoors, and the very high level means that pubs and restaurants will be closed. A very high level will only be introduced for the time being in Liverpool and its surroundings, where the number of infections is the highest. In France, the highest state of emergency is already enforced in Paris, Lyon and Marseille, Toulouse and Montpellier. A gigantic smear center has been opened in Lyon. Only in such a big place we are able to safely test about 1,000 people a day. There are also limits in stores, bars, cafes and sports halls are closed. It is similar in Italy. Bars and restaurants must be closed before midnight. The number of people who can attend funerals, weddings or baptism ceremonies is limited to 30. Amateur sports such as soccer or basketball are also forbidden. At the same time, the local government excludes the possibility of returning to a lockdown of the whole country. In the Czech Republic, however, we decided to close the lower classes of elementary school. The important thing is that we already know when these students will return to school. It will be on the 2nd of November. Apart from schools, bars, restaurants, theaters, cinemas, gyms and swimming pools are to be closed. The local authorities also speak of a total ban on groups of more than 6 people and on the consumption of alcohol.
And now fans all over the world have held their breath as top striker Cristiano Ronaldo was tested positive for COVID-19. The 5-time Golden Ball winner feels good, shows no symptoms and stays in isolation.
Ronaldo was isolated from the rest of the team and the staff of the national team. They passed additional tests and all turned out to be negative. A positive test result means that the Portuguese will not play in the upcoming League of Nations game against Sweden on Wednesday. Ronaldo recently played 2 matches in the national team. Portugal played a friendly game against Spain and then against France in a League of Nations game. The captain of the Portuguese team therefore had contact with such soccer stars as Kylian Mbappé, Antoine Griezmann and Paul Pogba. It should be assumed that Ronaldo, apart from the national team's match, will not be performing in Juventus Turin's next games, including his debut in the Champions League.
And that's a wrap. Thank you very much for joining us on Flash News. See you tomorrow, same time, and for now, goodbye.